letting me move back and forth. Yeah, for some reason it's not letting me move back. But anyway, I use that same title slide for almost everything I do.
Try hitting it again.
All right. No, it's not letting me move. I wonder why that is.
Some of the same problem when I did the talk.
Try
Oh.
tapping the little right arrow down at the bottom.
The right arrow. Okay.
So if you hover over the slide, you should get a little circle with a right arrow on it.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, well, we'll just go right to, there it is. Okay. Today's presentation. So I have some disclaimer slides because I do go into some medical nutritional information. And I always like to, claim I don't know much of anything. And the more I read and the more time I spend, the less I know. Why everyone should be eating some mushrooms every day. I realize I'm preaching to the choir, but I do like to get this information across and out and give people talking points. I'm a little bit evangelical about everyone should be eating some mushrooms. I'm going to talk about agaricus cultivation because that's the major industry that I work in. And agaricus, of course, you guys know, covers, in this case, portobellas, creminis, white button mushrooms, and all those different names that surround that. A very brief history of mushroom cultivation in the Western world. And if any of you went to my talk that I gave to this group, the New Jersey group in 2016, some of this will be familiar. Don't give my punchlines away. And a cultivated mushroom beauty parade. And I included in this some cultivation about, around the specialties and also some medical information. I sort of like mashed up a lot of different talks that I give and put it into this one. So first disclaimer slide. So here's what I am. I am a mycologist by training at the University of Maine with Dr. Richard Hamola. I'm technical director at Phillips Mushroom Farms, which means I do whatever I'm directed. And I'm a mushroom geek. I know I'm in good company here. Here's what I'm not: a doctor, a pharmacist, or any sort of medical professional. So mushrooms are, as we know, beautiful. I mean, look at that picture. I took that in the mushroom house a couple years ago. They're delicious food, we know. They're functional food, and they're also medicine. So functional food, the definition of that is any food that gives you something beyond its nutritional label. And to me, that means all whole food. All whole food is functional food because what you get on the nutritional label doesn't come close to telling you what it is that's good about it. And of course, mushrooms have been seen as medicine for thousands of years. See if I can make this work. So everyone's seen this. Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And when I look at that, I think I'm over medicated. I always have been. I like this better. The right food, medicine is of no need. With the wrong food, medicine is of no use. And I truly believe this. The oldest written record of mushrooms as medicine is an Indian medical treatise from 3000 BC, but there's so much ethnobotany going on around mushrooms right now. I'm sure we'll know more about this very soon. So everybody recognizes this guy, right? I mean, most groups that I talk to, people are like, no, who is that? Paul Stamets. And he asked the question, I think it was in a 2011 TED Talk maybe, what single drug can benefit you by supporting and strengthening your immune system, providing anti-inflammatory properties, providing antioxidant properties, restricting blood vessel growth feeding tumors, causing programmed cell death of cancer cells, providing antiviral effects and restricting the growth of pathogenic bacteria, assisting conventional anti-cancer drugs to work more effectively at low doses. Of course, the answer is none. But mushrooms do all of these things. And I do spend a lot of my time combing through the medicinal mushroom literature. I'm constantly amazed. And I make mushroom tinctures in my kitchen. I give them to my friends who have cancer, and I've seen amazing things happen. So this is from Dr. Bob Beelman, who's at Penn State. He's retired. He's well into his 80s, but he started the Center of Excellence for Mushroom and Food Nutrition or something like that. And he's very, very active in the medicinal mushroom field. So mostly they were known for what they don't contain. And how many of us have heard this before? No cholesterol, low fat, low sodium, low calories, low glycemic index, no gluten. So nothing in there excites me about, okay, I have to go eat that. But slowly we've been discovering the healthy components of mushrooms. So good nutritional source of B vitamins, potassium and selenium, fiber, protein, that fifth sense of taste, beta glucans as immune enhancers, cholesterol lowering compounds, ergosterol to vitamin D, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, and ergothioneine and glutathione, which follow the literature, and it's exploded recently. So all mushrooms have differing amounts of fiber, beta glucans, terpenes, vitamins and minerals, proteins, and indoles. And I'm going to go into each of those things. And I did not know this until about a year and a half ago. Mushrooms have the highest fiber content of any food on a dry weight basis, both soluble and insoluble, interestingly enough. So they're great prebiotics. Cook your mushrooms. And you guys know this, right? Cooking lets us access all those good things in mushrooms. It breaks down those chitin cell walls and makes it available for our, especially our gut microflora to take advantage of, because most of our immune system resides in our gut, about 70% of it. The majority of mushroom polysaccharides are sugars with bound protein components, and it's that bound protein, that bond, that allows it to pass through our upper respiratory tract into our lower respiratory digestive tract. I'm all about respiration because I've been working with a group at Penn on mushrooms and COVID, but digestive tract is where our immune system resides. Binding of mushroom polysaccharides to different immune receptors triggers widespread immunological changes. And the more I read about this, the more I realize that every different mushroom has a different set of these beta glucans, and they all interact with our immune systems in different ways. So I honestly try to get as many different kinds of mushrooms on board every day as I can. Terpenes, diterpenes, and triterpenes. So research into these compounds show many potential beneficial activities such as anti-cancer, antiviral, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, liver protective, anti-obesity, blood sugar regulating, and antimicrobial. And I'm working right now with a group of poultry producers who had the idea to use our mushroom waste in various different ways to make the poultry healthier. So in feed, in their water, and also in their litter, to get that microbiome, which I'll talk about later on in the talk, to get that microbiome on board, especially now that there's high bird flu. They have to clean out the chicken houses completely. When they put new litter in the chicken house, they don't have the benefit of the microbiome that the last chickens left behind. So there's this like syndrome they call, I can't remember what they call, like new house syndrome. So we're looking at incorporating spent mushroom compost with its microbiome into chicken litter so that they can go in there with clean, virus-free litter and get that microbiome that they need, just as an aside. Vitamins, especially B vitamins and D. So you guys probably know, I mean, you're collecting wild mushrooms, there's tons of vitamin D in there, but if you're getting cultivated mushrooms, they're grown indoors under, artificial light. So when you get your mushrooms home from the supermarket, which I'm sure you guys do have to buy mushrooms occasionally, put them in the sun, gill side up, put them in a sunny windowsill, and they'll increase the vitamin D content. So minerals, especially zinc, copper, iron, phosphorus, and potassium. So which has more potassium? That portobello or a banana? And bananas actually aren't that great for potassium. Mushrooms have a lot of potassium.
But I don't see.
Pardon?
um,
What happened here? So mushrooms have more potassium than bananas. Mushrooms are very high quality protein and contain all 9 essential amino acids, which has made them a really popular food, of course, for vegans and vegetarians. Mushrooms contain indoles such as serotonin, melatonin, 5-HTP, all indicated for improving mood and sleep, something I'm always looking for. Mushrooms contain phenolic compounds, which include flavonoids, phenolic acids, polyphenols, which are all considered protective. And some studies show them to have anti-aging effects, mostly due to being good dietary antioxidants. And this is one of the reasons why they're good in chicken water. All mushrooms have a degree of anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, prebiotic, which I think I talked about already, and immunomodulation. So mushroom polysaccharides restore immune competency in people whose immune systems are compromised by stress, chronic illness. Oh, geez, every time I move, I change my screen, and autoimmune conditions. So who hasn't heard of all of these things? Up till, a few years ago, I hadn't, but autoimmune disorders seem to be proliferating. So I get this question a lot, especially from my friends. I have several friends who have multiple sclerosis, which is an autoimmune condition. So it seems counterintuitive. If something stimulates your immune system, wouldn't it be bad for someone with an autoimmune condition? And in fact, it works by down-regulating key components of the pro-inflammatory response, which is also what has made it really interesting in controlling serious COVID, because of course you get that cytokine storm and you end up drowning in your own white blood cells, and mushrooms downregulate that inflammatory response. I love this. The 4 horsemen of the medical apocalypse, coronary heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and Alzheimer's, might be riding the same steed, and that's inflammation. So here's how it may work. You get a wound or an infection, and your immune system triggers an inflammatory response, rushing white blood cells to the scene, which activate interleukins, and that's the cytokine storm that happens with serious flu. Interleukins cause specialized proteins to the area. These proteins signal the cells at the wound site not to die and to reproduce rapidly to heal the wound. The infected cells reproduce until other chemistry signals tell them to stop. After about a week, the immune system downregulates the interleukins and proteins, causing an anti-inflammatory response. Chronic inflammation allows cancer cells to use the inflammatory response to grow rapidly, producing tumors. Mushrooms downregulate the interleukins, producing an anti-inflammatory response. And there's so much good literature out there about how this helps people fight cancer. So all of these disease states are linked to chronic inflammation. So keep this slide in mind. So chronic inflammation, all cancer stages, neurological diseases, depression, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, diabetes complications, pulmonary disease, bone and joint disease, metabolic disorders, autoimmune disorders, cardiovascular disease, all linked to chronic inflammation. And keep that slide in mind, because you're going to see one very like it coming up. Which brings me to ergothioneine. And I wish I could have the whole room in here and ask you how many people have heard this term, ergothioneine. It's exploded into the scientific literature, but I don't have a clear feeling about, if it's become sort of part of the vernacular. We can't talk about ergothioneine without talking about glutathione. And then I'm going to talk about phosphatidylserine. So ergothioneine, it's possibly a new vitamin, although I think we've decided not to go in that direction. We all need it, but we can't make it. Every cell in every mammal has a special transport system just for ergothioneine, to bring ergothioneine from our food into the interior of the cell. So we know it's important that every cell has a transporter to get ergothioneine into our cells. And I have porcini here in the background because porcini is extremely high in ergothioneine. So it's a naturally occurring amino acid made by very few organisms, and we don't make it. We have to get it from our food. Mushrooms are one of the few organisms that make ergothioneine. So here's some dietary sources of ergothioneine. And I have this because Dr. Beelman, who I talked about before, who's a emeritus professor at Penn State, I serve on a board of directors in Central PA. And so when I go to visit him, I always bring a box of mushrooms. And the first time I did that, I brought a big box of all the mushrooms that we grow. And I was like, well, you know, we might have mushrooms for dinner, but he whipped the box out of my hands and he put it in his refrigerator downstairs and he took them to the lab and he tested them for ergothioneine. So lion's mane, very high in ergothioneine. Yellow oysters even higher. I don't have that on the slide here. Oysters are very high, shiitake's high. Button mushrooms are, you know, not as high as other mushrooms, but still, compared to the next one down, chicken liver, very high in ergothioneine. So he mined the literature and came up with this data. So estimated average ergothioneine consumption milligrams per day. In Italy, very high. So they eat a lot of porcini. Porcini is very high in ergothioneine, but also they respect their agricultural soils better than we do. So the fungal networks in the soil produce ergothioneine, which is taken up by plants. And so you get more ergothioneine. In no-till organic systems, the food is much higher in ergothioneine. Ireland, of course, also has pretty good agricultural practices in general, but also the right climate to have lots of fungi in the soil. France, they eat mushrooms a lot more than we do here in the US. Finland, low. US, very low. They didn't go into Asia with this data, which I would find interesting. And then he put together Alzheimer's dementia rate versus ergothioneine consumption. So of course we know that correlation is not causation, but Parkinson's disease death rate, life expectancy. And here's where we have to bring glutathione in. Glutathione is that very small molecule that's produced by the body and we get from food, and it's found in every cell. So it is the most important antioxidant because it's actually within the cell. So mushrooms also contain quite a lot of glutathione, and their glutathione content tends to go with their ergothioneine content. So you recognize this. Oxidative stress and disease. The same disease states are linked to oxidative stress that are released to inflammation. Oxidative stress triggers inflammation. Inflammation triggers oxidative stress. So once you get on this treadmill, it's hard to get off. So if you look at a hospital situation, people have cancer, AIDS, every serious disease, almost invariably they're depleted in glutathione. And the reasons for this aren't completely understood, but we do know that glutathione is extremely important to maintaining intercellular health. And so this is what ergothioneine does. And this turns out to be extremely important. Ergothioneine is an adaptive antioxidant. It goes to the place of most need. So if there's any stresses to organs and cells, like in extreme illness, it will go where it's most needed, leaving your other vital organs unprotected. So ergothioneine, we know, resides in your body for about a month. And if you're depleted in ergothioneine, then you're also depleted in glutathione because ergothioneine keeps your glutathione content stable. And that turns out to be extremely important. And we don't really get ergothioneine from any food but mushrooms, unless you eat a lot of organ meat or grow your own food in a no-till garden. phosphatidylserine. And I picked this up out of The Fungal Pharmacy. Some of you might be familiar with that book. Horse mushrooms have one of the highest concentrations of phosphatidylserine, a chemical that boosts brain function of any mushroom, making it of likely interest to formulators. I had never heard of phosphatidylserine, and certainly not in association with mushrooms. And when I looked into the literature, there's very little information about ergothiate or phosphatidylserine content in other mushrooms, besides, of course, horse mushrooms and agaricus, but this is not a portobello. This is a wild mushroom. So phosphatidylserine is a fatty substance produced in the body that covers and protects every cell in the body, is involved in the clotting function of the body. It's particularly vital for proper functioning of nerve cells within the brain, helping to transmit messages between them. So it's present in the human body. The body can make phosphatidylserine, but most of what it needs comes from foods. And you can take it as a supplement, which used to be made from cow brains, but now they're made from cabbage and soy. But I'd rather not take supplements. I want to eat good food. So I got in this, once I found out that this is a supplement, I looked into it more. So Dr. Axe is like, I don't know, internet doctor guy. May improve symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, aids in the slowdown of age-related cognitive decline, combats depression, improves Parkinson's disease symptoms, treats ADHD symptoms, and boosts athletic performance. So those are pretty big, broad claims. So as recommended by Dr. Axe, for a dosage for treating Alzheimer's disease is 100 milligrams 3 times a day for a total of 300 milligrams. Again, that's from drax.com. If my calculations are correct, then 1 or 2 mushrooms a day would provide that dosage. And because there's very little information on phosphatidylserine in other mushrooms, I have to go with portobellas here. Oh, what did I do? There we go. So foods high in phosphatidylserine. Soy lecithin, pretty high. Bovine brain, ew. Mackerel, not so bad. Chicken heart, ew. Not a big organ meat fan. Horse mushrooms, 100 grams. It would give you a pretty good dose. I was in the drugstore one day and I saw this Nariva brain performance. It's time to brain better. And so I look at the price, $60. And this is for a month's supply. Flipped it over and look what the ingredients are. I don't know if you can see that, but vitamin B6, folate, vitamin B12, coffee fruit extract, and phosphatidylserine. Pennies worth of ingredients for $60 a month. Eat your mushrooms. And that ends my obligatory, what I make everybody listen to eat mushrooms every day. And we'll slip right into commercial agaricus production. I'm trying to move this out of the way so I can see my screen, but I don't know how to do that. So I will mess with it. So agaricus bisporus, as you guys probably know, covers white button mushrooms, all of the different iterations of brown agaricus. Of course, it's still agaricus bisporus, cremini, chestnut mushrooms, Roman brown mushrooms, Swiss brown, Italian brown. It's all the same thing. And then, of course, portobellas, which I've seen portobello, portobella, and portobello. I've seen it spelled all of those different ways. This is from John Donahue of Northwest Mycological Consultants. So principles of mushroom cultivation, and this applies to anything you're going to try to grow. Create a nutrient source that is selective for your mushroom. Inoculate the substrate with your fungus so that it will dominate. Manage the environment to favor growth and nutrient utilization. Foster periodic mushroom initiation and development. These 4 things are true for every mushroom you're going to grow. We already went through that. I know a lot of you have been to the farm and have been in Kennett Square because you're not that far away, except you folks in Maine, maybe not. But there's this mushroom house form called standard Pennsylvania mushroom doubles. And that happened because before then, all of the mushrooms were singles. And I think this happened like around 1920. They were 2 tiers of beds under one peaked roof with one door, a mushroom single. At some point that was doubled, and you have 2 doors under a peaked roof and 4 tiers of beds inside. And I think I have a good cutaway shot of what that looks like. Here's a more modern mushroom farm. We have a modern Dutch style farm in Maryland. And this is the first phase of it. We now have 4 of them this size. And then compare that to this mushroom house in Bhutan. This is again, from Northwest Mycological Company, Northwest Mycological Company out of Oregon. And they sell this sort of turnkey mushroom house. We've started modifying greenhouses. This is on our farm in Kennett Square to grow mushrooms. This is they used to grow mushrooms in caves in Western Pennsylvania. Many of you might remember that, but then they found natural gas, so they're fracking there now instead. They're no longer growing mushrooms. This is from a tray farm in Oklahoma, just to give you some idea of the variability and versatility of this mushroom. This is a mushroom farm in Hungary, and a lot of Europe grows mushrooms this way because one family can get these bags of compost, cased compost from compost suppliers, and grow enough that they can harvest them with their own family, and then they can avoid a lot of regulation, frankly. So steps in agaricus cultivation. I'll try not to get carried away here because I get so excited about this. So we have phase 1 composting done outside, also done in tunnels now because people want to eat food, but they don't want to smell food being grown. And they definitely don't want to smell composting. So a lot of composting has been driven indoors because, we're just getting more and more crowded as a planet. Phase 2 composting also done in the mushroom house or in tunnels. Spawning, spawn run, also called phase 3 composting, casing, pinning, and of course our favorite, picking. I put this slide up because I go out to 4th grade classes a lot for Pennsylvania week. So I have, the kids will go, I don't eat mushrooms, they grow in poop. I'm like, no, they don't grow in poop. They grow in compost, not soil, not manure, they grow in compost. I also spend a lot of time in DC with regulators. And so getting these terms right turns out to be really important. So what we're doing when we grow agaricus is growing a succession of microorganisms, including bacteria, actinomycetes, yeast, and a lot of other fungi. So this is great work done by a guy named Dr. Kurtz out of Australia in just one batch of mushroom compost that he tested. And this is just one sample at one time, at one point in time in a compost pile. 330 fungal species, 66% of which have not been identified. Over 32,000 different strains of bacteria, 96% of which have not been identified. So this is a whole sort of microbiome all on its own. So it's a different kind of biological diversity than we think about usually. And of course, this is what's happening. You have these complex carbohydrates in your compost, microbes making more microbes, but also making waste products that then they use up all of their source of food. They're putting out waste, they die back. The next series of microbes move in that can use their waste, and then they create their own waste. And so there's this really elegant succession, and it is kind of still a black box. There's so much we don't understand about this. This is big steaming heaps of compost, which if you drive through southern Chester County, you're going to see and smell, and you're going to smell that and say, that smells wonderful. It smells like money. Here's a partial list of agaricus compost ingredients. This is just partial. Depending on where you are in the world, it's going to be different. So hay, straw, all kinds of cereal straw, horse manure, very important, poultry manure, corn cobs, corn stover, switchgrass, cottonseed hulls, spent brewer's grain, cocoa hulls, soybean meal, cottonseed meal, grape pumice, canola meal, gypsum, calcium carbonate, and other things. So depending on where you are in the world, mushrooms grow on agricultural and industrial waste. And that's why how I got involved originally was I loved being a thrifty Yankee from Vermont. I love the idea of making this wonderful protein out of waste. So here's one recipe for agaricus compost. And this is for one mushroom double. If you remember what that peaked house looks like. This happens to be my husband's recipe. I am married to a mushroom farmer. So mushrooms 24/7, 365, 21 tons of hay. And one thing that our family farm does different, and I'm saying my husband's farm, is that he gets in his own hay, makes his own compost, and puts his spent mushroom compost back on his hay fields, and quadrupled his hay production when he started doing that. So it's an elegant sort of closed loop system. So 21 tons of hay, 50 tons of straw-bedded horse manure. Horse manure turns out to be a really critical raw material for the mushroom industry. So there's people who make their entire livings, many people, hauling straw-bedded horse manure into the mushroom industry. 800 pounds of soybean meal, 5 tons of cottonseed hulls, a waste of cotton manufacture, cottonseed meal, 3 tons of gypsum to keep that compost open and airy and not get slimy, cocoa bean hulls out of Hershey, and wet spent brewer's grain. And so, my husband and I go out to dinner occasionally, and we go to brew pubs, and we always go back and say, what do you do with your spent brewer's grain? So a couple of local breweries bring their spent brewer's grain in the back of their trucks, and they dump it in my husband's brewer's grain bin. So it's good for them. It's good for us. They don't have to landfill it, and we get that valuable raw material. Here's another recipe: 70% hay, 17% straw-bedded horse manure, chicken manure, wheat straw, gypsum, cottonseed hulls, corn cob. So the purpose of phase 1 compost, and on my husband's farm, we still do this outdoors. We're trying to make the compost both selective and suppressive. So we want to make it selective for agaricus mycelium to grow on. And we want to make it suppressive to weed molds. So we create ammonia, which is a disinfectant, and that tends to kill back a lot of the weed organisms. We reduce the soluble carbohydrates to discourage the weed molds, and we incorporate, of course, plenty of water. So phase 2 composting is done either in tunnels or in beds in the mushroom house. And the mushroom industry is constantly, of course, evolving. The vast majority of composting is done in tunnels and brought to the farm, but still there's a few farms that still do it in the beds. So 2 main purposes: final conditioning of compost so that it becomes mushroom specific, pasteurization to kill off competitor molds and pathogens. So we're converting nitrogen into protein in the form of microbial bodies. And that's what agaricus likes to eat. So it's best done by thermophiles, these heat-loving actinomycetes and bacteria at 115 to 135. And that temperature has to be maintained for at least 96 hours. At the end, it's pasteurized. So at least 140 for at least 2 hours. Some growers go much higher and much longer. Really good growers can do this without any added heat. So if you control the air going in, then of course there's so much biological activity there that it gets extremely hot. And it's mostly a matter of keeping that heat down so that you don't burn everything up. But most growers bring in a boiler, like a portable boiler, and bring that up to do the final pasteurization. And then it has to be conditioned. You have to lower the temperature fairly slowly from 130 to 118 for 5 to 7 days. And then it can be cooled down into the mesophilic range where we exist for the introduction of the mushroom spawn. And of course, pure agaricus spawn culture is expanded on lots of different substrates. most commonly millet, rye, milo, and then the stuff we call speed spawn. That's a mineral and grain powders that gives you many more points of inoculum. So it just really depends on the conditions at the farm, what the farmer wants in spawn. So millet and grain gives the mycelium a little bit of protection. So if you're going into an environment that's not ideal, that seed coat gives the mycelium that much, a little bit of protection so that it's a little more tolerant. If everything's going perfectly, you go in with mineral and grain powders because it gives you many more points of inoculum, and you can get the spawn to grow through the substrate that much faster. So this is how it arrives at the farm in these breather filter bags. Spawn run, also called phase 3. It's done in beds, it's done in bags, it's done in blocks, or it's done in trays. So you can see in the beds, you inoculate the compost. It gets tamped down by these special machines. We put plastic on, and then the spawn run grows from 10 to 14 days, depending. And you can see the white spots underneath the plastic where it's starting to grow there. And you can imagine in a mushroom double with all those tons of compost that you have not only the agaricus mycelium growing, which you can see is very white and beautiful there, but you have all of those tens of thousands of different organisms that are still growing and multiplying in the compost. And then in the casing layer, which you can see here, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, there's even again over 32,000 different microorganisms happening there. So it's hard for me to explain to regulators coming in talking about food safety that you can water that bed with salmonella or listeria or whatever. It cannot compete with the microbial biodiversity in the casing, on the mushrooms, and in the compost. Once you pick the mushrooms, that's a whole different thing. But this is an extremely selective food with a high degree of biodiversity that human pathogens cannot compete on. So that's a constant frustration to me, is like, regulators want everything to be bacteria free. You can't grow mushrooms without tens of thousands of different kinds of bacteria. So if you're in Kennett Square, you see these trucks zooming around with these casing rings on the side. And they make a particular sound when they go down the road. And we had a dog once that just made her crazy. She would chase those trucks right down the road. She just, that sound. I'm like, what are you gonna do when you catch one? So as you can see, there's also still a lot of manual labor involved in mushrooms. So these casing tubs get filled with casing, which is peat moss and some calcium carbonate and some gypsum, sometimes some grain. Yeah, different farmers have different recipes of casing, but it's mostly peat moss. So the inside of the mushroom double looks like this. You can see the sideboards holding the compost in. The casing rings are put on the bed so that you get a nice even layer of mushroom casing, and that helps you get a nice even flush of mushrooms. I'm losing my voice already. So that once you put that casing layer on, the mycelium has to grow up from the compost into the casing, and that takes like 3 to 7 days, depending on if you put some extra inoculum in the casing. And then you're changing the environment, controlling your CO2, oxygen, water, airflow, so you get a nice even flush of mushrooms. Excuse me. And of course, our favorite part, picking. And this is a shot of my husband's farm. Like, yeah, you're doing the right thing. You should be a mushroom grower if you can do that. It's not easy to do. And I'm going to whip right into a very short history of agaricus cultivation in the Western world. Some of you will have seen this before. This is a story that Rick Kerrigan told at a mushroom conference I went to probably 15 years ago. I was like, that can't be true. I looked into it, and in fact, it might be. So everybody remembers Sherman and Peabody? And I took some notes earlier because I love this story. So mushrooms have been grown under Paris since at least 1638. And apparently there's still some of that going on, and it's on my bucket list to go see that. So that's what it looked like. They would make these little ricks of compost, inoculate them, and then case them with like a paste of limestone and water. And Marie Antoinette. So what does Marie Antoinette have to do with mushrooms? Grain was milled mostly during that time by horses, you know, drawing a mill wheel around, grinding grain, doing what horses do, what everybody does really, eating and pooping. So the mycelium of wild agaricus would colonize these mill tracks, the horse poop, and enterprising people would come in and cut that up into these bricks and then sell them to the mushroom growers under Paris for spawn. And that's what mushroom spawn was for hundreds of years. So French spawn, it differs from English spawn by being in the form of small tufty cakes instead of in compact blocks. So every cake we sell is guaranteed to be tracked, and they've been called cakes since at least 1707. But even before that, mushroom spawn was called cakes. Mushroom spawn, 3 large cakes. Let them eat cake? So his theory was that when Marie Antoinette said, in response to the peasants have no bread, she said, let them eat cake. She was telling everyone to eat shit, which apparently made everybody angry. So that's his story. And I thought it was compelling enough. I looked into it, and in fact, it might be true. But this poor lady, I mean, she was married off to King Louis when she was 14 years old. Yeah, she didn't have much of a chance, but I'm not going to go into that. Which brings me to our cultivated mushroom beauty parade. How am I doing time-wise? Oh, surprisingly well. And this I just mashed up today, so I'm hoping it goes well. So cultivated mushrooms divided into soil or compost inhabiting mushrooms, wood decay mushrooms. The vast variety are wood decay mushrooms. Some mushrooms are plant pathogens. And then there's, of course, that very important group that's insect or larvae parasites. Soil inhabiting mushrooms. Of course, we know about agaricus, and I did that slide before. So I'm going to whip through that. The use of agaricus mushrooms for medicine was first described in the Byzantine treatise by Orivasius in the 4th century AD. So mushrooms as medicine has been in the Western culture for far longer than even I thought. Without reading through this big cluttered slide, the consumption of agaricus bisporus with green tea has an inverse association with the occurrence of breast cancer. And the numbers there are the equivalent of 1 mushroom a day can reduce your risk of developing breast cancer by about 56%. Add green tea to that, and you bring that up to about 86%. So 1 mushroom a day. Why wouldn't we do that? Using mushrooms as a prebiotic may help glucose regulation, and I love this. I love this story. So eating white button mushrooms can create subtle shifts in the microbial community in the gut, and I've just been reading a lot of papers about this, which can improve the regulation of glucose in the liver. It also suggests that better understanding this connection between mushrooms and gut microbes in mice could one day pave the way for new diabetes treatments. But there's a lot of ways that our microbiome communicates with our brain to do a lot of magical things. So more specifically, mushrooms encourage the growth of Prevotella, which produces more propionate and succinate, which changes the expression of genes needed to manage glucose production. I love that story. The mice were fed the human equivalent of a 3-ounce serving, which is not a great deal. Lepista nuda wood bluets aren't very commonly found here, but they're grown fairly commonly in Europe. And the reason we don't grow them here is that they tie up the real estate of a mushroom house for about 100 days, which is about 2.5 times longer than it would take us to get a crop of agaricus off. But these are delicious mushrooms. I did a bunch of experiments years ago, decades ago, and I dumped them in my yard. And now every year, every like August, I get a beautiful bloom of these purple mushrooms in my yard. Agaricus brasiliensis, a wonderful almond agaricus that turns out to be the most sought after medicinal mushroom in Japan, but grown all over the world, including the US. Again, takes up a lot of real estate for longer and with lower yields. So you have to have the right market if you want to go into that. Shaggy mane, nobody grows them. They're easy to grow and they're delicious, but of course they have no shelf life. They would be like, I've got a slide of it, Volvariella, Volvaceae, paddy straw mushrooms. They have to go right from the farm into ice water to the cannery. This would be the same thing. Oh no, I'm getting a message that my internet's unstable, so hopefully we can get through this. They've also recently found a component of shaggy mane mushrooms that treats some fairly recalcitrant forms of leukemia. Of course, truffles, I don't like them, but you can buy truffle trees. And I found pecan truffles in Chester County. You guys probably have New Jersey too. But during an answer, I'd love to know if anyone's found pecan truffles. But you can buy truffle trees and plant them, and in 7 to 20 years, get some truffles. And then you can get a truffle pig, but nobody uses truffle pigs anymore because pigs want the truffles. Dogs don't want truffles, but they want to make you happy and they can find truffles for you. So people use truffle dogs nowadays. Morels, these are actually morels that we grew on the farm. Turns out to be pretty difficult, not impossible. They tasted really good, but you have to sell morels by the pound. If we could sell them by the quart, we could have made it work, but you can't. And there's wild morels available at less money than it took us to produce them. But still, it was thrilling to grow them. So jumping right into wood inhabiting mushrooms, which is the vast majority of the variety of mushrooms are, of course, wood inhabiting mushrooms. Shiitake, I love this mushroom. We used to make our own shiitake logs, grow our own shiitake. Now we get shiitake logs from China, which really makes me sad that they can do it so much better than we can. But, we get them in containers, they come in frozen, put them on the beds, let them thaw out, give them some water, and they produce beautiful mushrooms. So this is what our shiitake logs look like now. Shiitake is best known for its immunomodulating properties and as an antiviral. I mentioned this before, if you dry your shiitake in the sun or put any mushroom in the sun, greatly increase their vitamin D content by a lot, from 110 international units to 46,000. And this is vitamin D the same way we make it, so our body recognizes it and uses it really effectively. Extracts of shiitake have been used to treat AIDS, herpes, Western equine encephalitis virus, shown to inhibit the effects of polio, measles, mumps, very well known as a good antiviral. And I pulled this paper out about, of course, mushrooms and COVID. So really, for no other reason, you should be eating your mushrooms to reduce the effects of your, COVID infection. Pleurotus ostreatus. Now, this way lies madness. You guys are probably really great taxonomists. I'm not, but I did do my master's work in oyster mushrooms and looked at oyster taxonomy, and oyster taxonomy is a mess. So these aren't my identifications, but I'm pretty sure this is Pleurotus ostreatus, and this is what we grow on the farm. So we've found through the years that you can't, on a commercial scale, you can't pin oysters and grow oysters in the same facility. So we actually do the spawn run and the pinning in one facility and then move those bags into a fruiting room to fruit them, because the mature mushrooms put out something, and we don't even know what, that prevents the other pins from developing. So we tend to fill a house all at once, grow the mushrooms, empty it out, sanitize it, and move the next batch in. There's something that they do that inhibits other oysters from growing. And it took us a number of years to figure that out, but we got it down now. Pleurotus is best known for its cholesterol lowering benefits. So the same benefits as statins, but without the liver toxicity. It's known as a supplement for athletes because athletes who are training hard are susceptible to respiratory infections, and oyster mushrooms tend to reduce the incidence of respiratory infections in athletes that are training hard. Blood glucose control, diabetes, colitis. It makes a hydrogel that's been a pretty effective treatment for colitis. Of course, antioxidant and anti-cancer. Pleurotus pulmonarius, we also grow some of this sometimes. Pleurotus citrinopalliatus. I think this is also called cornucopia. Again, oyster taxonomy, don't want to go there. This is a picture. The USDA found an old USDA publication from like the 1880s that had mushrooms, that featured mushrooms. And so they sent someone up to take pictures. And this is a picture that their photographer took, and it's just beautiful. And this is how we grow them on our farm. And this again is a picture that the USDA photographer took. Pleurotus oryngii, we call it royal trumpet, king oyster, poor man's porcini. It has the wonderful texture of porcini, but not that taste. And this is them growing in our mushroom houses. Pleurotus florida, Pleurotus sajaracaju, Pleurotus cornucopia, Pleurotus flabellatus. I actually took this picture in Australia. We grow this one just to show off sometimes because it's so pretty. Pleurotus salmoniostramineus. Pleurotus dejamour, beautiful name, beautiful mushroom. Pleurotus columbinus. Pleurotus cystidiosus. Pleurotus ferulii, which is apparently gaining traction in Asia. Volvariella, very commonly grown in tropical parts of the world. I don't know of anyone growing them in North America, Central America, or South America. And if anyone hears differently, I would love to hear about that, because I love this mushroom. I find it growing in my garden sometimes, just as a volunteer. Pleurotus tuberegium, so you can eat the tuber and the mushroom. Here's the tuber. One of my favorites, Graphola frondosa, maitake, hen of the woods, sheep's head. And that's how we grow it on our farm. Maitake increases the benefits of chemotherapy by 12 to 28%. Alleviates the side effects of chemotherapy. Superior to most mushrooms for breast cancer tumor inhibition. It's well known for blood sugar control and used clinically to treat polycystic ovary syndrome, which is interesting because polycystic ovary syndrome is linked to diabetes. And I've got both, or my family has both. I've dodged the diabetes bullet, but I do have polycystic ovary syndrome. Cancer Centers of America send their patients to Phillips to get this mushroom when they're undergoing breast cancer treatment. There's a lot of great literature supporting that. Another one of my favorites, lion's mane, also called pom-pom, satyr's beard, hedgehog. We grow a lot of this, and this one has really gained traction because word's gotten out that it is nature's nutrient for the neurons. And there's a lot of reasons for this, and I have a whole hour talk that I give just on lion's mane. A triple threat, at least for neurodegeneration and neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, neuropathy, dementia. It's got hericenones and arenosines. It's got a lot of ergothioneine and these dilinoleyl phosphatidylethynolamine, which is a very, very common membrane component of nerve cells. So this one, people, when they start taking it, see a huge difference, especially with neuropathy. Folioto. I also love this mushroom. As a young person, I was like, that's disgusting. It's like sneezing in your food. Why would you do that? It's kind of an acquired taste, but when you cook them, like saute them nice and crisp, they're so good. So Namiko means slimy mushroom in Japanese. Also apparently the most commonly cultivated mushroom by volume in Japan. And yeah, there's lots of reasons why we should be eating this right now. So these health benefits of sticky foods. So the sticky substance, which is made of a combination of protein and sugar, helps clean the blood and stop blood sugar from growing up, prevents stroke, heart attack, hardening of the arteries. Mucin protects the mucous membranes of digestive organs. So there's lots of good reasons to eat sticky, slimy food, especially this one. So again, lots of great benefits to this. Enoki, I went to Japan in the 90s and learned how to grow this mushroom. And our Japanese host said the reason why Japanese kids are smarter than American kids is because they eat this mushroom. That's what they told me. It's been cultivated in China for consumption and medicinal use since at least 800 AD. Best known for its curative properties for liver diseases and gastroenteric ulcers. This was pretty compelling. An epidemiological study in Japan found that enoki growers near the city of Nagano, which is where we went to learn how to grow them, had unusually low cancer rates. Frequent consumption of enoki was considered the main difference. But I would say you could slot any mushroom in there and get the same result. This is a great one if you want to grow some in your garden. You probably all recognize this one. Stropharia rugosa annulata, also called wine cap or garden giant. And you can buy spawn for this online, lots of places. I have this series of pictures from Field and Forest Products, good friends of mine working out of Wisconsin. So you can inoculate your mulch beds with this. You can make your own little bed with straw and have a beautiful flush of wine cap. When I grew agaricus in a past life, I did this in my agaricus trenches. So when I took the old mulch out in the spring, put new mulch in with some wine cap spawn and grow some mushrooms that would come up about the same time as you were harvesting asparagus. There's some wine cap growing in a cornfield, growing in a squash patch. I love this co-cropping. And I suspect that the co-cropping with mushrooms and vegetables is going to give your vegetables a higher ergothioneine content. And there's being work done at Rodale Institute on this even as we speak. They're doing oats and I forget what else, oats and tomatoes maybe, co-cropping with mushrooms to see if it will increase the ergothioneine content. Ganoderma species, and I don't actually know what this species is, if you can help me with that. I isolated it here in Vermont many years ago off of a maple stump, but we can grow them very easily on straw. So we grow them occasionally just for our own use because it's such a great medicinal mushroom. Piopini, I love this one also. Agroscibia agerita. So Nicandros, a Greek physician in the 2nd century, taught mushroom cultivation, and these are the mushrooms he was growing. It always amazes me. We think we're so smart, but I feel like we've forgotten more than we ever knew. So we call POPD the anti-mushroom, anti-inflammatory, antifungal, antibiotic, anti-tumor. Beach mushrooms, love these. I found them growing in the wild a number of times. You guys might have as well. Hypsozygus tessulatus. Of course, Tremella fusiformis is a co-culture. I think it's a yeast and a fungus. Wood ear, which is very easy to grow, but found in the wild so commonly with a wealth of health benefits. Again, as an aside, I've read a lot of literature about this mushroom and reishi in wound healing. And my husband has skin cancer from a lifetime of farming. And he had some, he has cancers removed twice a year fairly regularly. And it was getting more aggressive. So I started making him take mushroom extract in his tea, but also I made a face cream with this 15 mushroom extract that I make, which includes this one and reishi. And he was using it. He had an appointment to get a cancer removed. And he'd been using it for about 3 weeks before he went back into the doctor. And the doctor looked at his face and said, I don't know what happened, but the cancer's not there anymore. So we're going to keep an eye on it, and he's going to keep using this stuff. And if it slows the cancer down to that extent, then that's something we're going to have to act on and get out to the public. Nobody's going to make any money on it. It's mushrooms and 50 cents worth of ingredients. So how do you get that out? I don't know. But anyway, we're going to keep using it. Polyporus umbellatus, not commonly found here, but fairly common in some parts of Asia. Turkey tail, used pharmaceutically in Asia for cancer therapy routinely. We're just backwards because nobody can patent it. And of course, chaga, which is not a cultivated mushroom, although there's a company in the Netherlands that's learning how to grow it commercially, because it has been hunted to extinction in some parts of the world. And I can't leave out psilocybe here because it's easy to grow. There's lots of great work being done now on psilocybin and depression, anxiety. So I had to put that in there. The one that's a plant pathogen, wheat lacote, corn smut. So you can actually you can buy special corn that's susceptible to the fungus, and it will, it'll pick up an inoculum and grow without any effort on your part. Or you can get the culture and put it on your corn silk and grow some of this. And I don't know if you've ever tried it, but it's delicious. Don't pronounce it wrong. I was in Mexico at a mushroom conference, and the talk was about corn smut. And if you pronounce it wrong in Mexico, it refers to the female anatomy in the rudest way you can imagine. And so we were at lunch and we were talking away, and my Puerto Rican friend and I were mispronouncing it. And our Mexican friend was like, oh my God, you guys, shut up. We had to go outside. He was laughing so hard. So wheat lacote, don't mispronounce it. And of course, cordyceps of all its different species. I had to give it its own category, but a very important medicinal. This one I gave to my father for the last 10 years of his life because he had COPD and he really felt like it made a difference. And he lived to be 88, far beyond anyone's expectations. Is the mushrooms are just being ornery? Who knows? And that's it. So I hope that wasn't too much information, too little information, too disjointed. So I don't know if we have time to talk still or if it's getting too late. But I'd love
we
any-
have time.
All right.
I know we have at least one question in the chat.
I don't have a chat here. Let me see.
Yes.
How do I find the chat?
Yeah.
I probably have to get out of this screen, right? So stop my screen sharing.
Yeah. You
Would
can.
it be possible to listen to the recording? Because I came in so late. I'm so sorry that I did.
Yes, if you send an email to president@njmico.org.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how to get out of, do I? Well, I guess we could leave this beautiful lady up there while I answer
Yeah,
questions,
that's
but
fine.
I don't know.
Allison, are you still on?
I am, yes.
Yes. Would you like to ask your question about a book?
Well, yes, you mentioned a book, but I'm sure that that doesn't help you. But it was it was towards the beginning of your presentation, the part that you said you always give.
The fungal pharmacy
Yes, thank you.
is what it's called. And it's by, I think his name is Moore. Let me flip back and I can find that.
I can probably Google that and see.
Well, I have it up here. Here we go. It is by Robert Rogers, The Fungal Pharmacy. It was published in 2011. It's a good read. I read it on a long plane ride. It was very good, very easy to read, very interesting.
Hey, Lila, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Hi, Tina. Thanks for speaking with us tonight. It was great. My question.
I wish I could see you.
Oh,
I
let me
see.
turn my video on here.
And I have,
All right, here I am. Can you see me?
what's your name?
Lila.
Let me go flip back here, look for a face.
Yeah.
Lila, we only see the top of your head.
Oh, I see.
Oh, here we
Okay, there you
go.
are.
There I am. Yeah, all right. I'm on my laptop, so. So anyway, thanks for speaking with us again. And I wanted to ask you about the labor shortage. I heard somewhere that there's a lot of issues with commercial growers not being able to harvest all of their mushrooms because they can't get the people.
Yep, that's
and-
absolutely true.
Yeah,
That is
so-
the limiting factor. So of course, there's a lot of work being done on, developing robots to pick mushrooms. You invest so much time and energy and work into a crop, and then to see it rot on the beds is heartbreaking.
I
Same is
would
true with
think so.
any farms,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a serious problem.
Yeah, especially for a product that's so beneficial. Wow.
Yeah, and mushrooms are having a
scheduled.
moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike Inskeep, would you like to ask your question?
How do the mushroom rings work? How do they even out the growth? I would think they would create barriers to the growth.
The casing rings.
Yeah,
The casing rings, we just put them in. We put them on the bed, put the casing material on, and then lift the rings out. So they're just there to give us an even layer. And then we take them out again.
I see. So it's only temporary.
It's only temporary. They're only in there to give us an idea of, how deep we want the casing and to make it nice and even.
I understand. Thank you.
Are there any more other questions from anyone? I know we mostly have thank yous and wonderful, wonderful presentations in the chat room.
I have one.
Allison has a question.
It's a little off topic, so if anyone else has anything, please just answer that first. But I was wondering if there's time to just speak very briefly about the mushrooms that are related to the insects and the parasites, I think you said.
Oh, the cordyceps.
Yeah, are those possible to cultivate? And the reason I ask is, and I'm a complete and I don't know anything about mushrooms, but I'm a South African, and the area I came from, there was a mushroom that grew just at a particular time of the year in a very small geographical location that as far as I know, no one's been able to cultivate. And we understood, my parents were farmers, we understood that it was tied to termites, and that when the termites swarmed with the rains, that is when this mushroom appeared in the fields. And I don't know if it was causation, correlation, what it was, but I was just so interested to see that on your list, that there are fungi that have some type of relationship with insects.
Yes, and the one that's associated with termites, that's a different. I would have to look that up, but don't termites
I only know the zoo name, I
cultivate
don't
their
know the
own
scientific name.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to look that up, but I think if you Google, and I can picture it, termites actually cultivate mushrooms, and some ants do as
So that's
well.
well known. Oh, okay.
Yes, yeah, and I can't remember the Latin name. That's different than the cordyceps, which actually grows on insects and fruits
Oh, it does.
from the insects.
Mm.
But there is a mushroom associated with termites. I can't think of it though. That might be a good
I
one
don't know if
too.
it's the
But did-
same one. The Zulu name is Amakowe, but I don't know what the.
Did you collect them and eat them?
Yes, they were, and they would go for so much money. The kids would stand on the side of the road and sell them. And, you know, everyone from that area, they were really famous and would buy them. And they were absolutely, and they would get quite big sometimes.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like
And I
maybe the
recall reading
foot-
about that. I should probably add that to my cultivation, although they're being cultivated by the termites, I think.
Well, but, you know, that's just what, you know, my father was just a farmer and he just thought that through observation. So I was interested to see that on your list and I thought, well, maybe he was right.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. Yeah, it's different than the cordyceps. And there's a whole bunch of, I mean, you guys are, this is why I love the New Jersey group, because I'm not a good field mycologist at all. And people always ask me to do forays. So I'm like, yeah, I'll do a foray if I can get someone from the New Jersey club to come out and help me.
Just Tina, there is a genus Termitomyces that has a number of species, and I'm sure it refers to these termites that cultivate these mushrooms for food source for themselves or for their young, feed it to them.
I think you're right. And they grow the mycelium, but then the mushrooms, of course, want to spread their spores. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Termitomyces is, I just Googled it and there's a whole list of species.
Cool.
Can you put that in the chat? Because I can't spell that out by myself.
I did for you.
Oh, thank
Oh,
you.
good for you, Michael.
I can't see the chat. How come I can't see the chat?
If you go to the bottom of your screen, right next to share screen to the left of it should be chat.
Chat, there it is. All right. You think by now I would know how to use Zoom, but okay, there it is. Cool. But not grown by people, grown by termites. Is it cultivated by humans too?
Oh, that I don't know.
Yeah,
This-
I'll
this
look into that later. Yeah.
This paper that I put the link to is about termites cultivating this fungus.
So again, this is just farmer stories, but apparently the big mushroom grower in South Africa, which at the time I think was Tonga Hewlett's, and they had button mushrooms. Apparently they spent a lot of money researching this because it's just so popular and were unable to reproduce it. But again, that just could be farmer's rumor. I don't know if that's true.
Interesting.
Tina, can I ask you about the shiitake logs?
Sure.
Did you go from the blocks to the logs, and did that mean you had to get rid of that big dipping thing? That big dipping vat that you use to soak your bags in, or your block?
Yeah. And of course, all of that facility has now been turned into mushroom packing.
Oh,
Yeah, we don't have to soak them anymore, but we are looking into, like I said, we're working with this contract research firm on applying our mushroom waste, including our shiitake logs, to making poultry happier and healthier and better for us. Better for them, better for us. So, yeah, I hate the idea of importing logs from China
yeah.
to
Yeah, I
grow
would
shiitake,
think,
but they do it better than we do and for less money.
and it's still more worthwhile to ship it from China so that you can grow it in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
crazy.
That is
crazy.
crazy.
Going back to the chicken research, so you're feeding them in their water, their litter. This is all the compost waste stream?
Well, we're in the early stages of this project, but we're looking at we're looking at the spent mushroom compost for the microbiome,
Mhm.
but also to remediate the ammonia problem in chicken litter. Because a lot of the organisms that are in agaricus compost are good at using ammonia and converting it into protein or other things. So we're in the very early stages of this project, but it has a lot of potential. And then even, you know, you can feed chickens things through their water, so they can even take our spent logs and do a simple water extraction and get all kinds of great polysaccharides, terpenes, phenols, things that are great antivirals, antimicrobials, you know, the ergothioneine, you know, things that'll make the chickens happier, healthier, and more comfortable, and make happy, healthy chicken and eggs as well. So we're still in the very early stages of this, doing a lot of literature searches.
Okay.
But I love the idea of taking the waste from, you know, I love the circular economy. So we use poultry manure to make the mushroom compost. If we can then turn the mushroom compost back to solve some of these other problems, would make me so happy.
Yeah.
Well, I must say, I'm glad I only had to learn mushroom Latin names, because those medicine things, I counted one of those words had 24 letters in it.
Yeah.
And then there was a hyphenated word in front of it. I couldn't even imagine myself remembering that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm immersed in it all day, but yeah.
But you're not a doctor.
Nope. And the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know anything.
Tina, are you still able to call your mushrooms organic?
Yes.
Oh, because you grow your own straw or whatever, and all of the other components come from organic places?
Well, that's a whole nother hour of talking. So
Well, I just remember that was a thing a lot of years ago with.
yeah. And we're still working with regulators. I mean, we certify mushrooms under a crop standard. There is no mushroom standard. There's a crop standard, and mushrooms are a crop, and it's working well. So if a organic farmer puts straw mulch down on their field, that straw mulch doesn't have to be certified organic, for example. So it's not like feeding animals that you have to feed them all organic feed to make them organic. It's a whole different, yeah, I don't even want to go there. Yeah.
I have a question about it kind of circles back to the talk about the chickens, just because with I don't know if, as you mentioned at the beginning of the talk, the benefit of just consuming the whole food, which is very beneficial clearly, but a lot of people who don't have access to fresh food may have to supplement. And is there any information that you have about why the nutrients are more accessible and more beneficial when consumed in the whole food as opposed to the supplement? Because like with the chicken example, you're kind of putting it into kind of repopulating their hen house or, you know, chicken house with the real stuff instead of just giving them some mushroom supplement. And that's part of the experiment, right? Is the real thing instead of the pill form. And why is that more accessible metabolically to consume the whole food as opposed to when it's converted into, you know, pill form? And then on top of that, you know, there's that other layer of the regulation where the supplements are really not that regulated, and you could get, you know, 2 different supplements from different manufacturers, and it actually contains like completely different stuff.
Right. Well, I mean, with food, you know what you're getting, but also consider the path that food takes through your body. So as soon as you eat the food, you put it in your mouth, a whole bunch of enzymes in your saliva. And then there's a lot of interactions, even when you eat something things happen in your mouth, things happen with all your senses. It triggers parts of your brain. It travels through your digestive tract, you know, feeding not only you, but all of your bugs. And we are what? We are 98% other and 2% human by numbers. So we're feeding this whole other organ that is our microbiome. And we evolved eating food. And I'm not saying that I don't recommend people take supplements. I do. Like if you don't eat mushrooms, you should take a mushroom supplement. If you don't like mushrooms or whatever, get your mushrooms. However you can, get your mushrooms. I prefer whole food, but I do mushroom extract. There's this thing on the market people keep telling me about called mushroom mud. And I've been making mushroom mud for years, just doing a gross water extract of mushrooms. I put it in my coffee every morning. I put it in my tea in the afternoon. However you get your mushrooms, get your mushrooms. That's my message. Because there's things we get from mushrooms we do not get from other food. So I prefer whole food, but I do extracts of all different kinds on my counter. You know, I'm making mushroom lotion now for my husband with skin cancer. I mean, however you get mushrooms into your life, get them into your life.
What do you think of mushroom salts? I've been reading about those.
I don't know. Tell me about that.
I don't know anything about it. I just was reading
is a mushroom?
articles this month. I said, I never even knew there was such a thing. But basically, I think they make mushroom powder and you just sort of sprinkle it on things. But
Yeah, I mean, I
really
know we
don't
sell a
if
lot
it's
of that
too
at the
salty,
farm.
you
Like
know?
we have a lot of different mushroom salt flavors. I don't know what the benefits of that would be. I mean, besides that they taste really great, but is there a particular benefit to mushroom salts? I don't know.
I don't know.
What about cooking? Is it better to cook the mushrooms than to eat them raw?
I would say a pretty unequivocal yes, because a lot of what's good in mushrooms is bound up. I don't know if you remember that slide I had of the mushroom cell wall.
No, I came late, that's why.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
a lot of that, a lot of what's in mushrooms is hard for us to digest, and cooking breaks down that chitin and cell wall and makes those beta glucans and other glucans, especially, and terpenes and phenols more available. I always cook mushrooms, which is not to say there's anything wrong with eating them raw, but you get more benefit if you cook them.
Okay.
It's more available.
So when you make your mushroom mud or any type of salve or tincture or whatever, you do it with cooked mushrooms?
The cooking is part of the extraction. Yeah.
Okay.
So when I make the mushroom mud, I just, put raw mushrooms in my blender with water, whiz them up so you break down all those cell walls, and then I simmer it for 4 to 8 hours. And then I just put it through the blender again, because that it further breaks it down, and then I put it in my freezer and take it out and use it. If I don't want the sludge in my coffee, then I strain it through a tea strainer. But I've become pretty immune to sludge in my coffee. If I don't have sludge in my coffee now, I feel like I'm missing something.
Texture. You like texture in your coffee.
Yeah.
That's
And you
good.
said 4 to 8 hours or 48 hours?
No, 4 to 8.
Okay.
Yeah. And if I'm doing something like chaga or reishi or something that's a little more like a harder mushroom, I might do it for longer. It just depends on what I'm doing.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I guess we can call it a night.
All
And
right.
thank you so much, Tina, for
Nice
doing
to
this.
see you guys. Nice to see you,
Thank
Susan.
you.
We should do this more
Yes,
often. We
thank
should just
you.
talk this way, since we don't get to
Yes.
see each other much.
Not at all, hardly, but yes. I have to email you.
Yeah.
That's-
Yeah, I'd rather be in your house with your cats.
I know, I got one right here.
Oh,
We see him.
oh, look, there they are.
There's Agnes.
Uh,
Well, I will see you in August for sure.
Right.
Either
yeah.
way.
Yeah, we should talk about that, but not here.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good night.
we don't want to take every.